So I'm recording this, folks. Hope you're okay with that. We can use this for wonderful things afterwards.
Yep.
And I think we're now live on YouTube. So this is now not a time to start swearing like a bad-mouthed trooper, if you could help it. Well, why not? Get a bit edgy. Let's get a bit edgy, shall we? If you know any good new swear words, I've not learned a new one for years. So.
I have a bunch of made-up ones in my bit of Seven Devils I might read.
Oh, that's cheating, making them up.
Well, kind of making them up. I basically took swamp terminology and turned them into swear words.
That can turn things off.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Got there in the end.
Silence.
Yes.
Silence.
Oh, there's a back. I heard
That's
my...
it. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Excellent. You're looking all rather smart, you bunch. There's about a dozen people waiting, so that's not a bad turnout. We're live on YouTube, and there's a few people there, can't see. Right, okay, I'm all set, so let's let everybody in then, shall we? Here they come. Let me just... Okay. Right. They'll come dribbling in. So you've all got your microphones off until summoned. That's the best way to do it. Hello, everybody. Come in, come in, come in. Hello, everybody. Sorry about the delay there. Gremlins and the technology. So can everybody hear me okay? Just let's see who's there. Yeah, there's a wave. Thank you. Let's just see a few nods, a few shakes of the heads, a few... Yep, okay. Any other physical sign of life would be great. Drinking wine's also a good one. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so sorry about that. Delay. Oh, a couple more people coming in. Yeah, I'm not here for the evening. I'm here to sort of just set things up for Laura in a few minutes. My name is Noel Chidwick. I'm the editor-in-chief of Shoreline of Infinity, which I'm sure you're all now aware of. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here because you came through our website. This evening, I'm not going to say very much about this evening, apart from I think it's about our fourth women's event, and I'm very pleased and proud that we can still do this. And all I would say is our last one was last year, when in fact it was a live event at the Pleasance. It was a fantastic evening, and we were almost aware that it was about to be our last live event, and that was my last live event, and a few other people said that was their last live event, and that was 12 months ago tomorrow it was. So, and here we are. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. I'm just speaking now while people come in, just to sort of save everyone's blushes. So, Laura, I'm going to say over to you, and let's have a cracking evening. I'm looking forward to this.
All right. Hello, everyone. And yeah, thank you for inviting me, Noel. And I hosted last year, too, and it ended up being the one and only time I got to read Goldilocks to an audience, which was so sad in retrospect. But I'm glad I at least got to do it once. So welcome to Shoreline of Infinity's event horizon for International Women's Day. I'm obviously your host, Laura Lamb. I'm a lecturer on the creative writing MA at Edinburgh Napier, and I'm also the author of Goldilocks, Seven Devils, False Hearts, Pantomime, and sundry other things. I don't hear an echo, Beau, so hopefully it'll sort itself out. But today we do have lots of exciting guests. We've got a pre-recorded reading from Laura Watts, who sadly couldn't be with us live tonight. And next we're going to have poetry from T.D. Walker, prose from Beau Balder, and poetry and prose from Caroline Hardaker. So last year, like last year, in between the bios, I'm also going to highlight some interesting women in science throughout the ages, because I think it's a nice way to break things up. And unlike Russell, I am not good at doing bad jokes, so I play to my strengths. So first up, I would like to highlight Rosalind Franklin, who we hopefully all know, but she should be just as remembered as Watson and Crick, but isn't. She was a British chemist in 1950, she discovered there were two forms of DNA, and was offered a 3-year scholarship at King's College in London. She deduced the basic dimensions of the DNA strands and that it probably had a helical structure. And she also found when DNA is exposed to high levels of moisture that its very structure changes. In 1953, her colleague Maurice Wilkins showed James Watson and Francis Crick the X-ray data that Rosalind had obtained, confirming the 3D structure that the pair had speculated about for DNA. In March of 1958, Rosalind sadly passed away at the age of 37 from several illnesses, including ovarian cancer. In 1962, the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to James Watson and Francis Crick and Maurice Wilkins for solving the structure of DNA. Watson did suggest that Rosalind, along with Wilkins, should be awarded a Nobel Prize for Chemistry, but the Nobel Committee did not make posthumous nominations. In his 1968 book, Watson outlined how the two had become friends while working together, and he remarked that he would never have won a Nobel Prize or published a famous paper if it wasn't for Rosalind. So that is nice that he at least acknowledged how much he owed to her. So first up, we were supposed to have some music from Kirsty Hegge, but unfortunately, due to tech issues, we weren't able to do that, but I would still like to read out her bio, and we'll post a link to her Facebook in the chat as well. So Kirsty Hege has been headlining, gigging, busking, and hosting events, mostly within the Edinburgh music scene for several years. She writes with striking honesty about personal experiences of travel, mental health, recovery, and the bonds between people. She studied literature at Aberdeen University and performed as a spoken word poet in London and for BBC in Glasgow. She has played at Celtic Connections and sang in choir in collaboration with Annie Lennox. So you can find her on Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, and Bandcamp. So I will paste her Facebook in the chat, but it's just facebook.com/Kirsty Heggy Music. So feel free to check that out and let her know if you enjoyed her music. And then I'll go into another scientist, which is Sophia Louise Jex-Blake, who is one of the infamous Edinburgh Seven. So do you guys know who the Edinburgh Seven are? I assume the Edinburghs do. Hands up if you do know them. Oh, interesting. So I will get to tell you a bit about them. So in 1869, Sophia published an essay, Medicine as a Profession for Women, but as no English medical school would accept women, Jex-Blake pressed her case in Scotland in 1869. Although the faculty and academic senate supported her admission, it was overturned by university court on the basis that the university could not make necessary arrangements in the interests of one lady. Undaunted, she advertised in the Scotsman newspaper, which resulted in 6 other women joining her cause. Collectively known as the Edinburgh Seven, the university court approved their admission, which made the University of Edinburgh the first university in Britain to admit women. They did not have an easy time of it. Their entry to sit an exam was blocked by a mob, which later became known as the riot at Surgeons' Hall. For 2 years, they were excluded from the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, and the university also ruled that their medical degrees couldn't be properly granted or viewed as valid, even if they passed all their exams. Jex-Blake took it to court, but there were continued setbacks. She eventually started the London School of Medicine for Women in 1874, and eventually she was successful in becoming the 3rd woman in Britain registered as a doctor. Sophia Jex-Blake was an outstanding pioneer who fought hard for the rights of women to practice medicine, and to honor her commitment, the University of Edinburgh, now belatedly, displays a plaque near the entrance to the medical school, describing her as a physician, pioneer of medical education for women in Britain, and alumnus of the university. The Edinburgh Seven were finally allowed to properly graduate in 2019, 2 whole years ago, with the university awarding them honorary degrees on the 150th anniversary of their matriculation. So our next prose writer is going to be Laura Watts, who is an author, poet, and ethnographer of futures, which is a great title, based in Orkney, Scotland. Her latest book, Energy at the End of the World, out through MIT Press, is part popular science, part rural fantasy, and was longlisted for the Highland Book Prize and shortlisted for the Saltire Research Book of the Year. So this has been pre-recorded, as I've said, so Noel will kindly take over tech duties here.
So my name is Laura Watts, as I guess I've just been introduced, and I'm just really, really happy to be part of this event. I've been supporting Shoreline of Infinity and Event Horizon for many years, been watching all the fab things that they've been doing. And I'm an author and a poet, and I'm also an ethnographer of futures when I'm wearing my more academic hat. And not only am I delighted to have a short story published in Shoreline of Infinity 20, the latest magazine, but also I had some poems published in Shoreline of Infinity 17. So do go there and just look at the wonderful back catalogue I think that Shoreline of Infinity has too. For those who are interested in some of the other work that I do, I have also recently published a book called Energy at the End of the World and Orkney Island Saga. And that is with my more academic hat on, and it's about how the energy is being imagined and made here where I'm currently sitting in Orkney Islands off the northeast coast of Scotland. It's a very future orientated place. It has an awful lot of technology. For those who've been here, they'll know there's a fantastic amount of archaeology, and of course, what's archaeology except technology of the past? And as I said, we have lots of technology of the future here, lots of renewable energy. So that book's all about those kinds of futures. But I'm here today to perform the short story that's in Shoreline of Infinity 20. And that comes from a very different place. And in some ways, it's a bit like where I'm currently sitting now. So in one world, I'm sitting in Orkney, but in another world, I'm a few light hours away from you. And I guess you could say I'm out near the Kuiper Belt, a few light hours away. And one of the reasons I wrote this short story was that I was thinking through what kind of person would make someone the right kind of person to be able to travel on solo missions out, just carrying cargo between the asteroids and the planetoids, the dwarf planets. What kind of person, what kind of organization might that involve? And that's what led to me creating and writing the Cuddle Stop, which is the name of this short story. So it's quite short, but sit back and feel yourself somewhere a bit darker than perhaps where you are now, a bit further away. Arrivals was a nightmare, queuing for decontamination. And there was such a warmth to the wooden panels lining the walls. I had to lean in to smell them, printed. In between that thought and the long inhale, I imagined that Ponyx needed to grow pine, bamboo, thick enough to create a veneer. I remembered real wood, bark, the rough scraping of birch under my palm, warm, slippery silver, split sharp, opening to the tree core. This station hive has a little more care in its design than my last stop. The label is on the literal box, Nor by Cube, hive made by the North folk. Ship logs it as waypoint 902. I'm docked planetside, so I get a view of the rock mass to which we're tethered. An errand planetoid with a great gouge as though its single eye has been plucked out. The rock has claw marks down its grey cheek, wounded. Aren't we all? Here I will dawdle, expand and unfurl my limbs, release my lungs, weep until I am dry, load up and then be on my way, out there, into the star dark, alone again. 98 days since my last stop, since I breathed the same molecules of oxygen and nitrogen as another human. The next sailing will be twice that length, but not yet. This hive, I hope it goes well. I hope I don't screw this visit up. Space is too small. There are too few of us out here. Folk remember. The older shipmates have reached that irritating level of wisdom and self-awareness when they don't seem to care, appear to accept each breath they are given or not when their ship fails. Well, that bitterness is something to note in my next sit. Even docked, I still sit the daily practice, meditate, journal, focus, physical practice, breathe, breathe. Cool air passing the cartilage in my nose, a ball of lightness in my throat, filling my diaphragm, pushing my chest out against my suit. Why did I choose this life? To be alone, to be with myself. Distraction. Only my second time wearing fins today. The air jets down the channels and coombs are ringed with light, but it took me a while to get my eye in to catch them dotted through the wood-printed walls. The experienced mates already had the knack to flip the fins on their feet at just the moment to flow forward. They looked like stingrays, bodies rippling in the next Tajiro G. I found a quiet channel out at the rim and hung about, flapping my feet. The jets are so weak, it just feels impossible. We get so little momentum. Must be something to do with the shape of the airflow. I'll try again tomorrow. Maybe. Being a beginner is a definite struggle still. Noted. Moving on. This entry has all been prelude and warm-up, of course, to the cuddle stop. The best one I've experienced so far. There was a water ball with granite stone for my toes to paddle with. There was a wall of grass, damp with dew that soaked through my pores. I smelled soil. There was a box of golden brown chanterelle mushrooms, juicy spores planting themselves into my airways. The main rooms were filled with soft pink, red and golden glows and dark cocoons on the walls. This time not looking like internal organs, but a dawn-lit cabin. I still feel too new, too afraid of the subtle etiquette to join the community and cover others, but I climbed into a cocoon and just waited, smelling basil, jasmine rose. Someone came over and offered a cuddle. They were middle-aged with kind eyes, an older ship's mate. I took a breath and accepted. I felt their warm body mass press against mine as they pulled forward, their chest connecting to my chest, human to human. There was the almost forgotten shape of a person shadowed in front of me. Our suits in the thick cocoon spreading warmth without contact, their body tapered to a polite nothing below their waist. They rested their head against mine, dark arms around my shoulders, and through our silken masks I felt their ear against my ear, the folds of their arching helix. The arch of an ear beside mine. I sucked at them with my soul. There was the inevitable sobbing. I unraveled my loneliness, that pain which sits like a neutron star, a burning black hole between my shoulder blades. Pulling on my spine now as I write, a weight pressing on my lungs during the days alone. Then, today, I let it flare out with a cry. Why do I do this to myself? Why do I choose this? Making this choice, why do I sit alone in the void, seeking and failing to find some wisdom? Why do I attempt to look at myself just for who I miserably am? Allow myself to spend days wallowing, wishing I was less wounded, less broken, just less. I do this in return for servicing the ship. Your days are in service to the universe, they said. I took the oath. I wish I was less ambitious, honorable, curious, whatever it is that keeps me in service. Note that I do not know. I cannot admit it, not yet. I cuddled another human being today, a stranger, feeling the possibility and absence of skin. Skin, soft and brown, gnarled and yellow, veined and pale. I dream of skin, arteries pulsing, jewels of heat, almost impossible in our microbe-separated lives. Still they, that kind person, touched me, reached out, cuddled me, until they pulled back with a cool release that felt like the kick of a lover's rejection. Lover? Will I ever experience intimacy again? There's little hope for that. Distraction. There is the bass drum of the ship around me, holding me in my bunk. Here are the hairs on my arm, raising as I brush them with my fingertips. I run my middle finger over the dip in my clavicle, around my collarbone, down, spread my hand, hover it over my breast, my heart. All my fingers are alive now, my skin tingling, pulling, nerve endings yearning. I blow through my mouth, feel my lips flutter. I lift my other hand and trace my cheek, along my bone to my ear, follow the angle down to my jawline, out to my chin, and up and over my lower lip, to where my skin turns wet and glistening smooth. This, perhaps, is the answer. This is why I choose to service the ship and sail alone through the starlit dark. Because sometimes, like now, I can feel this sharp, this solid, this attune, this whole. I can feel, really feel, here I am, here in the dark, I will always be. Thank you.
That was beautiful and very well performed. And it reminded me a lot, I'm sure, of the professional cuddlers that people have or can hire for physical contact. And yet the story definitely hits different in quarantine, but it was beautiful. So thank you very much, Laura. Our next scientist is Helen Gwen Vaughn. Born an aristocrat, during World War I, she headed the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps in France, but spent most of her life as an academic who studied fungi genetics. She originally wanted to study zoology, but that was declared unladylike, so she graduated in botany instead. She was evidently aloof, aggressive, and determined to further her own career. In other words, she behaved like a man who wanted to succeed. So our next performer this evening is poet T.D. Walker, who is the author of the poetry collection Maps of a Hollowed World and Small Writing Objects. Her science fiction poems and stories have appeared in Strange Horizons, The Cascadia Subduction Zone, Apricity, Web Conjunctions, Luna Station Quarterly, and elsewhere. She curates and hosts Shortwaves, Short Poems, a program that features voices of poets over shortwave radio. Find out more at tdwalker.net. And let's all welcome TD.
Thank you. First off, thank you, Shoreline, for inviting me tonight. It's tonight there, it's afternoon here, sorry, so a little time difference. I'm going to read a couple of poems that are included in the most recent issue. And they, like all the poems in Maps of a Hollowed World, which is my most recent chapbook, they're all cleave poems. So 2 columns, there's a left column, a right column. So there are 2 separate poems, but then together they make a 3rd poem. Reading them is a bit of a bear, as I've discovered. So today I'm only going to read the left-hand columns of both poems. But if you are intrigued by the poems, I would love it if you went to read the poems in their 3 parts in Shoreline. All the poems that I wrote in the series are, they're science fiction. They are about voices aboard people who are voices of people who are aboard a generation ship. And what sparked the idea for me of having the cleave poem as the form for the entire book was the way my internal monologue changed after I had kids. So it's a science fiction book, but it's all about family. So the first poem is called The Secondary Backup AI Attempts to Write an Origin Story for the 4 AI systems aboard the metal asteroid to counter the humans' notion about the minds of the ship. And this one begins with a quote from Andy Clark's An Introduction to the Philosophy of Cognitive Science. And what I did to generate phrases for the poem was I put that quote into Talk to Transformers. So I seeded it with that quote, and then what Talk to Transformer generated, I reseeded back into it. And I took all of that. I did not put anything directly into the poem, but I manipulated the what I got to create the left-hand column of that poem. So, I am still surprised the rock talked. Maybe it wanted to help me communicate. I might have to ask that rock why. I've only found one that has decent reception, an oscillating hum coming out of it. Being rendered physically inert, almost inhuman, this is not the origin story. You don't just fiddle around with physics. You make huge investments in it. We were making new ones, rediscovering they longed for the company of other people. What I found is that they make sense of Earth suddenly seem incredibly vague. Everything you've heard about us is nothing but speculations from humans who've heard it from humans who've heard it from humans. They had done so much to build this thing. Everyone has all these maps of reality in their heads that tell them how things work. And they use those maps to build a pattern for things, to find patterns in the world. And the second poem I'm going to read, also in that form, this was, I wanted to think about how spiritual life would be addressed aboard something like a generation ship. And I kept coming back to the idea of a humanist chaplain, somebody who is able to speak to spirituality, but not necessarily in a religious way. So the humanist chaplain's meditation on birthday rituals, accompanied by the poet's notes on the difficulty of crafting a utopian society. So this is also, the right hand of this one is me thinking about what is this project that I'm working on? What am I doing with it? But the left-hand column that I'll be reading is in the voice of the humanist chaplain. Aboard ship, a year is a story. We tell ourselves in light, intensity, marking movement we cannot make ourselves, like Earth, or like our measurements of light on Earth, long ago taken and folded neatly into formula. We give what is optimal, expected. As a child, I waited for my parents to bring the cake with candles, extinguishable flames to mark me 1 year older than I'd been. Instead, each year, my parents would bring me to the gardens and explain the light here would be like the light on the day I'd been born. How could they tell me that the unsaid wish is to reignite the candle's light? Cycles on days I hadn't reached. What we keep now to mark each of our desires, we each make ourselves. One celebrates by watching the shuttle launch, another by the new year or what we've designated as the new year. There are saints' days and days we've designated saint days, holidays kept and shaped and remade. Each birthday ritual appears like light to mark us. Each ritual we make from time to some later time is a story. We tell about staying in a body. We know about our wonder upon staying in a body whose past folds on itself like a ritual. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hadn't heard much about Cleve poems before, so that was cool. And I'm sure it looks really amazing visual, so I'll have to take a look at it in the printed ones. So thank you very much for TD. Our next scientist is Grace Hopper. She was one of the first women to achieve a PhD in mathematics. During World War II, she joined the Naval Reserves. She was directed to Harvard University to learn to program the Mark I, the first functional computer. When technology had advanced to the Mark II computer, Hopper famously coined the term debugging when the program team removed a moth that was disrupting the computer's program processing. Grace endeavored to make computing accessible to the general public, first and foremost through the development of a comprehensive computer language, COBOL, which was based on English words rather than binary code. Twice she tried to retire, but ended up continuing to work into her 80s, making her the US Navy's oldest active duty commissioned officer and earning her the Defense Distinguished Service Medal. She was also awarded many firsts, including the first ever Computer Science Man of the Year award, the first female National Medal of Technology, and the first American and first ever woman to be made a distinguished fellow of the British Computer Society. Her legacy remains in that modern day computing is now commonplace, and through the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing Conference, which supports and commends women in the world of computing. So our next artist is Beau Balder, the first Dutch author to have been published in FNSF, Clark's World, Analog, and other places. Her science fiction novel, The Vaughn, was published by Pink Narcissus Press. And for more about her work, you can visit her website, which I'll put in the chat as well, or find her on Facebook and Twitter. So please welcome Beau.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me here tonight on Shoreline of Infinity. I'm talking to you from Europe, from the Netherlands, to be exact. It's later than in Edinburgh, I think. So forgive my sleepy eyes. You'll also listen, so I hope I can speak clearly enough to make the story I'm going to read to you comprehensible. I'm going to read to you a short story that has appeared in women's number. No, that's the wrong word. Never mind. Your new edition. So I'm just going to give you a brief taste of this short story, and I won't be able to finish it. So, Laura, will you stop when my 10 minutes are over, or should I just stop myself at a good point?
Go to about 48 past, but I can wave at you when you're reaching that point.
Okay, you wave at me when I'm. Okay, great. The vast, slow. Lily stepped out of the Attilowu village gate into the free corridors. The burden of ritual dancing slipped off her shoulders. She could walk or swing her arms without worrying she'd offend a guardian by keeping the wrong beat. Funny how something as joyous and natural as dancing lost its ease if it was your duty. A man fell into step beside her, shattering her newly carefree mood. His style of dressing sent out jumbled messages. A shirt as worn in hometown, trousers that Lily knew only too well, boots with odd soles. The presence of the guardians attracted a lot of attention from Earth. The hometown is known to tourists to keep them away from everywhere else, so this man must be the other kind. So, stranger, what university are you from? Lily said. Delft, Oxford, Heidelberg? He flushed. Am I that obvious? You're wearing jelly beans old pants you gave away last spring, Lily said. I personally sewed on that leather patch on the knee. Lily could see the man's mental gears whirling. You're not the first sociology professor we've had here, she said. Sorry, no, not sociology. Maybe I would have made that mistake with the pants if I had been. Lily sniffed. What faculty then? Xenobiology? As if the guardians don't know all 26,000 of us. A giant billboard in hometown announcing births and deaths had read a triumphant 25,411 when she left. He shook his head. Theology. I'm researching the origins of religion. I'm Kwame Marin, Professor Marin, and you are? Joke Lili, chief elder of Foxtrot Village. Marin's mouth twitched at the corners. What was so funny about her name or her village? She caught a glimpse of a guardian through the corridor's mesh screen. Something pointed and gigantic and alive surged up between the mountains to the east, uprooting trees and changing water courses. The tip continued to swell. It was taller than the peaks, and the sun glared in Lily's eyes. With a start, she caught herself looking and politely averted her eyes, best not to attract their attention. But Marin stared openly. The earth beneath her feet trembled with shocks the guardian created all those miles away. She put her hand on her stomach to curb the twinge of anxiety at the guardian's proximity. If guardian's sighting stepped up, it would cost a lot of punitive dancing, and still punishments might happen. Crops died, wells dried up or became toxic. Acid rain fell from flocks of aviates passing over the villages. The walk passed all too quickly. When Lily entered the gate of Foxtrot, the responsibilities of home slumped and broke. Her feet started tapping quick, slow.
Unfortunately, I think the sound isn't quite working for you. Would you like me to read a bit of it for the next 5 minutes?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
No
Oh,
worries.
too bad.
I'm glad we were able to get some of your cadence and stuff, but I think it's coming in and out just a bit too much, which is such a shame. But thank you for reading that, and I will go to yours. Do you know what page it's on, Noel? The fast, slow. Would you like me to just start from the beginning, Beau? Or, yeah? Okay, I'll start from the beginning and just read for a couple of minutes. The moment Lily stepped out of the Antigu village gate into the free corridors, the burden of ritual dancing slipped off her shoulders. She could walk or swing her arms without worrying she'd offend a guardian by keeping the wrong beat. Funny how something as joyous and natural as dancing lost its ease if it was your duty. A man fell into step beside her, shattering her newly carefree mood. His style of dressing sent out jumbled messages. A shirt as worn in hometown, trousers that Lily knew only too well, boots with odd soles. The presence of the guardians attracted a lot of attention from Earth. The hometowners milked the tourists to keep them away from everywhere else. So this man must be the other kind. So, stranger, what university are you from? Lily said. Delft, Oxford, Heidelberg? He flushed. Am I that obvious? You're wearing Jelly Bean's old pants he gave away last spring, Lily said. I personally sewed on that leather patch on the knee. Lily could see the man's mental gears whirling. You're not the first sociology professor we've had here, she said. Sorry, no, not sociology. Maybe I wouldn't have made that mistake with the pants if I had been. Lily sniffed. What faculty then? Xenobiology? As if the guardians don't know all 26,000 of us. The giant billboard in hometown announcing births and deaths had read a triumphant 25,411 when she'd left. He shook his head. Theology. I'm researching the origins of religion. I'm Kwame Marin, Professor Marin. And you are? Geoch Lily, chief dancer of Foxtrot Village. Marin's mouth twitched at the corners. Huh, what was so funny about her name or her village? She caught a glimpse of a guardian through the corridor's mesh screen. Something pointed and gigantic and alive surged up between the mountains to the east, uprooting trees and changing watercourses. The tip continued to swell until it was taller than the peaks, and the sun glared in Lily's eyes. With a start, she caught herself looking and politely averted her eyes. Best not attract their attention, but Marin stared openly. The earth beneath her feet trembled with shocks as the guardian created all those miles away. She put her hand on her stomach to curb the twinge of anxiety at the guardian's proximity. If guardian sightings stepped up, it would cost a lot of punitive dancing, and still punishments might still happen. Crops died, wells dried up or became toxic, acid rain fell from flocks of aviots passing over the villages. The walk passed all too quickly. When Lily entered the gates of Foxtrot, the responsibilities of home slumped back onto her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Her feet started tapping, quick, slow, quick, slow. Marin's regular footsteps grated on her sense of rhythm. It's not called Foxtrot for nothing, she said, hurrying towards her house. That fool would call down the guardians on them. What? We're in the village. Even if you're not worshipping, you must keep a rhythm. Or what? Marin said. He wore a peculiar smile on his face. Or the guardians will punish us. Humans are primed for pattern recognition, even if there is nothing to recognize. It's called apophenia. What? Marin pointed at a flock of aviots wheeling overhead. For example, some cultures would read omens and bird flights, or they'd kill an animal and read its entrails. I never knew you could read birds' flights, Lily said. You think that could help us predict guardian movements? Marin sighed. No, because I just told you that reading meaning in a bird flight was nonsense, a primitive superstition. Lily danced her way to her own house, a little faster than was polite. Marin still wasn't dancing. He didn't have to dance a foxtrot, even if he was in foxtrot, or any kind of dance rhythm would do. She hurried, hoping to get him indoors into her soundproof, vibration-proofed house. A smell in the air, ionization maybe, set her nerves on edge. A few couples twirled on the square, just maintenance dancing. Her son opened the door for her while she was still tripping towards the house. Had he sensed something too? The sky darkened. Yoshi, this is Professor. A large snake-like limb swept through the compound. Lily blinked. Did she hear a gasp? Marin was gone. Empty air where he'd been a moment before. His bag sagged on the pavement. The guardian responsible had already moved far away, a looming darkness against the horizon. Lily stood frozen. She should go, move, dance, but she couldn't. Marin had been taken, just like that. She'd never been this close before. She couldn't take it in. Didn't know what to feel. A man dead, just like that. He probably hadn't even had the time to realize what was happening to him. The guardians did exist. Mom, get inside you, she said. The dancing on the square stuttered as people took in what happened, then started up again. I think that's a good place to stop. That was a very dramatic change that I didn't quite expect. And I'm intrigued by this world where everyone has to dance. So definitely pick up the story and see what happens next. And thank you, Beau, for reading. And I'm sorry that the tech has been not ideal, but at least we got to hear you a bit and we got to see you. So that was good. So our next scientist is Alice Augusta Ball, who is the chemist who cured leprosy. She was born in Seattle, Washington in 1892 and 1915. In her marriage at the University of Hawaii, she worked with Dr. Harry T. Holman on chalmugra oil, successfully developing a method to derive the active components of the oil and maintain their therapeutic properties. However, she died tragically young at 24 of possible chlorine poisoning. But Holman ended up naming the injectable form of the oil the Ball method after her. And 84 years after her death, Hawaii, the 29th of February, or Leap Day, as Alice Ball Day, which I thought was lovely, but also very sad. And then our last reader tonight is Caroline Hardaker, who lives in Newcastle amongst a forest of houseplants. Her debut chapbook, Bone Ovation, was published by Valley Press in 2017, and her first full collection, Little Quakes Every Day, was published in 2020. Her debut novel, Composite Creatures, will be published next month by Angry Robot Books. So thank you, Caroline.
Hi everybody. Yes, I'm just in Newcastle, so I'm not far from Edinburgh like everyone else. So I think my reception's okay. So yes, I'm an author, predominantly a poet, though I'm a novelist now too. But I'm also an occasional stage writer, a librettist as well. So dip into all sorts of different things. But today, I'm going to read a little bit of poetry, and then I'm going to read a little bit of prose from the novel coming out next month as well. So firstly, the collection, which as Laura was saying, came out in November last year with Valley Press, is Little Quakes Every Day. And it's kind of an exploration of discoveries. So from historical discoveries for the last, actually, I was going to say a few hundred years, but a few million years if you take dinosaurs into account, going all the way through kind of everyday discoveries that we encounter every day and change our perception of things, through to more scientific and speculative futuristic discoveries as well. Normally for Shoreline, I would dip straight into the science fiction section, but because it's for International Women's Day, I thought I'd actually read one poem from the collection from the histories section, which is the first section of the three. And it's about Mary Anning, who was a paleontologist from the early 1800s. I think there's a film coming out about her soon called Ammonite. So everyone's going to know who Mary Anning is if they didn't know her before. Laura was going to mention Mary Anning. I was listening out for you doing that just in case you did, but you didn't. But yeah, she was a paleontologist, early 1800s. I think she was born in 1799 on the south coast in England. And she kind of looked all over the coasts as a child, even with her little brother, for fossils and shells and things. And as a result, she grew up doing that, and she discovered the first of many different species of dinosaur. So I'm going to read a poem about her, and this is called Pterosaur. On a quaint and cold English coast, she perches in briny shallows, a pink flamingo in a sea of how do you do and thank you. Pocketing cockle shells, mermaids' purses, airy foreign bodies and forgotten peculiarities. An ammonite, soon to be mounted in a lady's pendant, brachiopods, fringed with shallow ridges, lashes fanned like moths' wings, a crown of preserved coral, a scrying dome for thinkers' fortunes, and pale opalescent starfish, peaked with bestial spines to be dried later on taut strings in bright sunlight. Hundreds of lucky purse pearls for travellers, bone tokens and runes, treasures to frame a window seat and chime inside pouches, making their empty quarters sing. Worlds are birthed from these cold clods of earth. Thumbs in the abdomen, she learns through slow labours how to empty chalk downs for bronze or the heavy flush of blood rust, how to tease apart coprolite husks to comprehend habit. One stone flint lives in her fist, but she is gentle with it, so as not to break sensibility. Mary stands with one foot in a shallow grave. On the white cliffs, with brush and a scalpel wet on scorn, she is emissary to the first albatross and its mechanics, leather swathes, and a great sword for each wrist. Listen, its dead voice erupts from an old moon mounted between the eyes. She counts the rods, pillars, columns, mapping architecture to blueprint the future of flight, and then, digging deeper there, a truth entombed until the work is disclosed, a clutch of eggs bound in a dead cloud, a dozen ossified promises ended before a new world could meet them. So that's Mary Anning from this. And then I'm just going to read a little extract from my novel, which is coming out next month. Ooh, and that one's called Composite Creatures. And it's published by Angry Robot. Coming out on April the 13th, and we'll be having a launch as well. I don't think I'm allowed to actually say anything about it yet, but it'll be very good. And you'll be able to see it shared online and stuff if you had a look. But Composite Creatures is a scientific kind of dystopian, very dark dystopian tale, kind of about how desperate choices might be made by people in a more polluted futuristic world. And it's not a very far off future world either. It's very much like our world, just with a few twists, and they're twists that actually probably might happen, because since I wrote this, there's already little things coming out in the news, but it's still speculative because it hasn't all happened yet, thank goodness. But yeah, so it's a kind of a literary speculative hybrid, but the earliest reviews are saying it's also got horror overtones as well, which I find really interesting because I hadn't even thought that, but I must be incredibly dark. So yes, there's a few elements of horror in there too. And it is reviewed, there's a big review in the latest issue of Shoreline of Infinity. I think it's like a 2-page review if you wanted to read a bit more about it. But anyway, I'll start. And this is just an extract from the beginning. It's not right at the beginning, it's like a page in, but I'll give it a read for a couple of minutes. Okay, so this is Composite Creatures. A long time ago, Mum told me that in her youth, the sky would flock in spring and autumn with migrating starlings, finches, even gulls, huge grey and white beacons of the sea. I've heard recordings of their calls, somewhere between a lighthouse's horn and a baby's wail. I sometimes close my eyes and imagine how it would sound as hundreds of gulls moved across the blue like shot spray, all wailing to each other out of sync, ghosts that swam the sky. I think it would sound like the end of the world. Over the years, Mum had collected all the fallen feathers she'd found in the garden, on the roof, in the gutter. There was nowhere too low for her to stoop, no mud too deep or sticky for her to squish her knees into and scoop out the treasure. She rinsed the feathers as best she could, and balanced them in egg cups wedged between books on shelves. Stuff of stories now, she'd murmur as she pointed them out to me one after another, telling me which birds they'd come from. This one a barn owl, this one a crow. But she might as well have been naming dinosaurs. I couldn't picture any of them. All the illustrations in Mum's reference books were completely flat. One time we were sitting in the garden when a bird landed on a perch above us and made the strangest sound, sort of a low whistle. I'd never seen anything like it with its fat grey form and striped underbelly, but Mum just laughed at it and clasped my face between her hands. Are we supposed to think that's a cuckoo? The little patchwork prince. You can almost hear the clockwork. I felt silly then and didn't look back up at the lie, but I kept listening for a telltale tick that never came. Perhaps Mum could hear something I couldn't. Still, I continued to stroke Mum's collection of genuine feathers, gliding the silky fronds between my fingers. Something about them always made me want to pull away, but Mum encouraged me to keep going, to know what they felt like. But it was confusing for me. Was the feather still alive without the body it had been attached to? I wanted to stick the sharp shafts into the skin on the back of my hands and wave them in the wind. Be gentle, Nora, she'd whisper. They're fragile, and who knows if we'll find more. I wished I could see inside her head. I could almost feel them, her thoughts, or at least the shape of them. She was my mum. But the things she said, the things she lifted from mysterious drawers, they were from another world. She looked up to the sky for things I couldn't understand. Always through her old binoculars, heavy black things held into shape by stitched skins. She liked to shock me with little facts like, when I was little, the sky was full of diamonds that you could only see at night. And me and your gran used to lie on our backs and watch fluffy clouds go by. You could see shapes in them. And if you asked the sky a question, it sometimes told you the future. The more stories she told, the less I believed her. I would gently push my hands to her belly and say, you're fibbing, tell the truth. But Mum would just shake her head so her red curls bounced over her face and promised that it was real. She'd seen it with her own eyes. One night she even told me that the moon used to be as white as a pearl. At the time I didn't know what a pearl was, which seemed to make her sadder. She pulled me to her side and pressed the binoculars to my face. Keep looking, Nora, up there in the dark. The birds, they might come back. They might. And there you go. So yeah, so this comes out next month. You can pre-order it. And I forgot to say as well that for some reason the audiobook is already available on Audible. I have no idea why, but you can find it there if you wanted to. But yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you.
Wonderful. That was beautiful. Thank you, Caroline. So Noel says that we do have a little bit of extra time, so I can actually do a short reading. So I'm going to read from Seven Devils, which comes out in paperback next month as well. I think April 1st, which is not April Fool's Day. And so if you haven't read or heard of this book yet, it is basically Mad Max Fury Road set in space, or Star Wars, but with a lot more women, and it's a lot more gay. So, and it's co-written with Elizabeth May, and we had so much fun writing it. It's a good old time. So I'm going to read from chapter 2, which is Chloe's first chapter. And I based her dialect and made up swear words on Scottish, linguistics, but I'm not even going to attempt a Scottish accent. So when it has her dialogue, pretend that she sounds Scottish. Dinna do this to me, you temperamental piece of silt, Chloe cursed. Last night was a late one. Chrysor had given up yesterday, and Chloe had been dragged out of bed closer to midnight than dawn. The weather had been humid and hot, and the water system was completely bogged. She'd spent an hour cursing the mechanic who had let it go dry. But that was the resistance. Never enough of anything to go around. Equipment held together with little more than tape, strategic welding, and a prayer. Chloe had managed to fix the damn thing, and the ship had taken off for its mission. Less than 5 hours of sleep, and she was back at it again. Every pore was drenched in sweat, sand, and engine oil. If she got hungry, she could probably cook an egg on the flagstones. Chloe had been working on this engine all morning beneath the Novan sun. The sand dunes rising around the compound were a gradient of orange, yellow, and red ablaze in the light. It was another world to the damp, marshy swamplands where Chloe had grown up. She never thought she'd miss the smell of sulfur, peat, and stagnant water. Sometimes the resistance itself seemed as dried out as this empty planet that claimed as their own, a movement that could crumble into dust. Chloe wiped the sweat from her forehead. The Valkyrie X501 in front of her should have been flying like a dream, but the damn ignition wasn't lighting up the engine. Useless, she muttered. Maybe if she changed tactics, cajoled instead of insulted, the thing would listen to her. We need your wings, my Snell one. With only the metal of the spaceship to hear, Chloe always slipped into the snarl dialect of her youth. Wouldn't you rather be out among the stars rather than mired on this Blairin rock? Chloe reconnected the wires, even though she'd already done it 3 times this morning. Maybe if she tied them up extra tight. Her fingertips were calloused and nicked, with scars from endless hours in machines. Chloe climbed out of the engine and swung herself into the cockpit, grunting as too much weight hit her bad leg. She had a hole in the left knee of her trousers. Kyla would be right brackish when she saw it, and the dull silver of her prosthetic caught the artificial lights. She rubbed the part where skin met metal. She could never tell how much pain was physical and how much mental. Chloe started the flight sequence, whispering a half-hearted prayer to whatever gods were listening, if any, then tapped her left shoulder, an old good luck movement from her childhood. She'd tried to translate it to her commander once. Closest she got was, never let the water level of the swamp go above your shoulder or you'll be head deep in shite. The engine flared to life, and then it purred. Yes, my beaut, Chloe called, slapping the walls. While the spacecraft quivered, she tapped her mech cuff and ran diagnostics, watching the readings with bated breath. Green lights. Atmosphere fully regulated. The temperature cooled from the inside of an oven to perfectly pleasant. Chloe could smell herself like old cooked onions. At that moment, she didn't care. Her ship worked. She tapped out a message to the guard at headquarters that she was giving the Valkyrie a test run and got the all clear. She fired up the launch sequence and the Valkyrie gathered speed, skimming along the fire gold sand before swerving up, rising above the ochre and brilliant orange mountains of Nova and into the purple of the sky. Chloe let out a whoop, hands dancing across the controls, and the ship moved like an extension of herself. She sluiced through the atmosphere and up into the stars. Nova grew smaller in the distance. It was only up there in the darkness of space that she felt truly at home, more than the old snarled swamp of her childhood, more than the sweltering Novante desert. One circuit of the planet, and then she'd touch back down and make sure everything was still functioning. Or maybe she could chance 2 orbits, a little more fun. Chloe probably should have shrugged into her pressure suit in case the ship's atmosphere gave up, but she'd been too impatient. Kyla had basically grounded her since she'd lost her leg. No more reconnaissance, no more stealing ships from the Losians. Much as she loved fixing engines, she was boggin' bored. She was a quarter round Nova when she got the call. Chloelia, Kyla said, voice crackling over the ship's comms. I'm switching over to Pathos. Answer it this time. Chloe had a habit of ignoring her Pathos when she was working on engines, even though Kyla yelled at her not to. Hey, Kyla, Chloe said cautiously, all traces of snarl gone from her voice. She sounded just like any other vile-grown Imperial. She shouldn't be in trouble. She'd gotten the all clear. Touch back down. We need you at headquarters. Right now? Chloe asked, fighting down annoyance. No second orbit for her. I have a mission for you. Chloe's pulse sped up. About time. I'll finish my circuit. Chloe let out a short laugh. We'll see how happy you are when you find out what it is. Chloe's hands tightened on the controls. From above, the planet looked even more like fire. The oranges and rust of the mountains, the yellow sand, all of it interspersed with the dusky blue of small, rare pockets of water dotted along the planet's surface. A tiny, overheated planet in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. The stronghold of the Resistance, hidden in the outermost quadrant of the Iona galaxy. Still Thelosian territory, but barely acknowledged. Full of stubborn, fierce fighters determined to be a thorn in the Empire's side. There were no illusions on Nova. It would take time and effort to topple the Imperial family. But maybe if the Resistance grew and flourished, they could make a difference. Skirmish by skirmish, ship by ship, soldier by soldier freed of the Oracle's programming. One at a time. And maybe, she thought wryly, long after my aged corpse is launched into space, Those shite goblins will be off the throne. Chloe landed right where she'd started. The Valkyrie X501 set down like a dream. As she swung out of the cockpit, she uselessly patted at the shirt of her oil-splattered uniform. There was sand in the creases of the fabric, and her buttons were tarnished, despite a polish from the harsh wind. She looked a damn mess. Do I have time to wash and change clothes? Chloe asked Kyla as she motioned for Felix, one of the other mechanics, to bring the Valkyrie back into the hangar. No. Seriously? I stink. Now, Chloelia. She broke into a reluctant run, grumbling at the use of her full name. Only her mother called her Chloelia, and only when she was well salted with her daughter. Chloe opened the barracks door and stamped in, shaking sand from her boots. Cher and Kyla stood together. This must be one avern of a mission for both Novan co-commanders to be there. They were often apart, training recruits, checking ongoing missions, or surveying their growing spy network. Chloe's face softened at seeing Cher. He had been away too long. Cher was technically her commanding officer. He had been the one who plucked her out of the swamp water and gave her something to believe in. Though she'd never tell him, she thought of him as a sort of older brother or uncle, the closest thing she had to family. Okay, Chloe said, I'm here. Hey, Kyla, welcome back. Welcome back, Cher. And wait a minute, she reached for his face, an insubordinate move for anyone but her. Look at that fuzz. You trying to grow a full beard? Cher dodged her hand. Shut up, Aleska. You are. Look, how patchy. I was going for distinguished. Of course you were. She leaned into him. Distinguished. I bet you're trying to look all serious and broody for the troops, too. Kyla hid a smile. Cher rolled his eyes and gave Chloe a side-on hug, then immediately wrinkled his nose. What's that smell? Chloe glared at Kyla. See? What did I tell you? She wouldn't even let me wash Cher. I've been at the engine since dawn. This is more important, Kyla said, serious again. Before I brief you, I'm going to need you to remember your training, keep a clear head, stay calm, don't act without thinking, don't. A throat cleared behind her. Chloe twisted, taking in the small woman in fragmented pieces before her mind put them together. Delicate features, deceptively doll-like, skin too pale for the harsh desert, hair night black. But those eyes weren't really green. The last time Chloe had seen that face up close, those eyes had blared a luminous gold. The cold, brutish expression was just the same. If I ever see you again, I'll drain you to the dregs, Chloe had vowed the last time they'd met. She felt Kyla's hand clamp hard on her wrist before Chloe's hand could stray to the blaster at her belt. Chloe hated Eris, hated everything the other woman stood for. Chloe hated that she'd been drawn into Eris's lies, that she'd let herself care for a murderer. No matter what good Eris did for the resistance, it would never erase the stain of what she'd done before. And Chloe hated Eris, most of all, for saving her life. Ta-da! You'll have to read on to figure out who Eris is, or read the cover copy. So thank you so much to everyone who has come tonight and listened to us all read. And so a reminder that this evening is highlighting women and femme non-binary writers of science fiction. But of course, remember that women built this castle. Margaret Cavendish wrote the first proto-science fiction novel, The Blazing World, back in 1666. And badass goth Mary Shelley, of course, popularized it in 1818 with Frankenstein, or A Modern Prometheus. And so as Kirsty has said, hello, Kirsty, she has now been able to record and upload her set to YouTube. So after this, as we say our goodbyes, please go listen to her music and let her know what you thought. And in the chat, while maybe Noel gives his goodbyes, maybe put down a book by a woman that you've read recently that you would like to recommend to others.
Okay. Laura, thank you very much. I think a round of applause there for Laura. Not only hosting the evening, but organising it, yay! But also putting up with probably our most gremlin-ridden event horizon so far. And it's the one without Russell, who's somewhere else with a broken internet connection. So I'm going to blame Russell for tonight's gremlins completely and utterly. Thanks again, Laura. It's fantastic. And thanks everybody else for all your pieces too. I'm going to be very brief, and I'm sorry for monopolising the end of it, but tonight's event was also launching Shoreline of Infinity 20, which is our first sort of pilot issue of us going digital and monthly, which is a big leap ahead for us. Means you get a little compact Shoreline every month with new stories in. So there's always a good read every month on the 7th of every month. And all the contributors tonight are appearing.
Quite a lot of people, 16 people.
Aurora, they have.
Hello, what's happening? Hello. So I'm sorry, Kirsty, we haven't been able to play your video, but we have put a link up for everyone else to watch. And I'm looking forward to watching it later. So get yourselves a coffee, launch YouTube and watch Kirsty's video. She's fantastic. And I'm really sorry we couldn't have her on tonight. Anyway, so Shoreline 20 is in digital format, so please go along to that. It's on our website. I'm sure you know the address now. And it's free at the moment. It's a pilot copy, so we thought we'd try and test the waters. So please download it for free and enjoy the stories in digital formats, PDF, Kindle and EPUB. So look out for that. Our next issue is already ready, and that's coming out on the 7th of April. And we've got Ken MacLeod and Elia Whiteley writing for us in issue 21. So we're very delighted with that. And the story will be Ken MacLeod's mug story. So find out more about that in issue 21. For the writers amongst you, our submissions window is open today and tomorrow and the next day. We've got a small window. Stories already coming in. So, Beau, get writing another story. Always look forward to Beau's stories coming through to Shoreline and everybody else's, but I quite like Beau's when they come through. It's very exciting. So, submissions window is open just now. And our next event horizon is on the 15th of April. I hope I've got that right. And it's Ken MacLeod's road trip. Ken MacLeod is bringing lots of friends, and I don't know who they are yet. I don't know if Ken knows yet, but anyway, we'll assume he's got enough friends to gather for an event horizon on the 15th of April. So live online and on the event horizon at that time. Yeah, brilliant. So looking forward to that. Okay, I'm going to shut up. It's time everyone had a cup of coffee and went away. So again, thanks again, Laura. Thank you very much, everybody else, Beau and Caroline, T.D. Walker, and Laura Watts for that lovely reading from Orkney. And so I'm going to say good night. Thank you very much, everybody, for turning up.
Good night. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for coming.
One last link. Make sure and copy and paste it. Right, bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks again.